So, I had realized I was in the land of the dead. And I was walking up to this city in twilight, okay? And it seemed like a lively city. And when I got into the city, I had seen the other kind of like gothic, really gothic, ghoulish people in that house. But most people I ran into when I got into the city were just looked normal. It's not like Beetlejuice where you got people walking around with axes in their head and shit like that. They just looked like normal people, and a lot of them seemed really comfortable. And I was like, I realized I was like, all these people are dead, but most of them were fine with it. They're like, oh yeah, we're dead, so what? But it was really interesting, and I can't remember all the details of the dream. I just remember it was a long dream, and I just sort of explored the city, and there was different things. And I remember at one point they didn't really have like businesses or restaurants or anything like that, because the thing is, in the land of the dead, you don't have to have a job because you don't have to eat because you're dead, and so it's more just like people hanging out and having leisure. And so it's like, I remember, I walked into this building, and there was like just the architecture was all weird and strange, and there was like a staircase that went to nowhere and shit like that, and like and in that building I ate something, and there was like I said, it wasn't like a restaurant. There was someone who like saw me, and they're like, hey, you want to try this? And they gave me some food, this plate of food, and I was like, yeah, sure. And I ate it, and I was like, oh, that's good, And so it's like in the land of the dead, people can eat, but they don't need to. So all these people were just sort of like, they were just going around and, just doing stuff that was interesting to them. So it was, even though I was in the land of the dead, it was an overwhelmingly, positive experience. It was fun. And I remember at the end, this is the main part, is at the end I came out of this building, and there was these people that were sitting, there was probably about 20 people, it was like in 2 rows of 10, that were sitting in these chairs, in like with tables in front of them, kind of like the UN, like where they were sitting there like deliberating and talking about stuff. And they were all wearing, it was all men for one, and they were all wearing black suits, and they were all wearing black top hats. And when I saw them, I made a joke. I was like, oh, it looks like I've stumbled into the business section. And they didn't, if they heard me, they didn't acknowledge me, and I just walked past them. I actually walked through them. Like, I actually stepped over their tables and shit, Like, I walked right down the middle of them. And I got to this point, and there was this huge area, and where I was standing, it was sort of at the edge of the city, and so it went off to this darkness, this really dark, like, vista with like trees and shit, and there weren't really any buildings out there. And there was this one part that was all walled off. It was like a huge, and it was a wall that was probably about 12 feet high, but there was like a really big opening at the corner. And I looked in there, and I saw this. It was just this rectangular building that looked more like a storage shed or something like that. It wasn't lit up, and I couldn't see any like doors or windows, at least from my angle. And I looked in there, and what I saw was sort of like an orchard. But it wasn't an orchard in the sense of like rows of trees. It was just random scattered trees. It was more like a pasture with a bunch of trees. And the way these trees were, is they were like willows where they had long stringy branches, but they grew up. They didn't go down like a willow. They went up. And some of them curled around like this. And I looked, and I heard like this, the first thing that struck me is I heard this like groaning, like sort of a cacophony of groaning, not really too loud, but sort of like, like zombies and shit like that. But like a lot of them. But it wasn't too loud is the thing. And I looked at the tree that was closest to me, and there was this guy, I guess it was a guy, but he was like this white, like really light gray, almost white, really ghoulish looking figure, where like he didn't have any clothes, and he was sort of like, "Ugh," and like, you know, all this like really haggard, you know. And he was, and the thing is, the tree had like its branches had wrapped around him, so he was just sitting there and he couldn't move. And I was just looking at this, and there was this whole huge field of these trees with people attached to them, with these ghoulish looking figures attached to them. And I was like, ugh. And I heard a voice from behind me. It was a man, and he said, "Don't go in there." And I looked, and he actually walked in front of me, and he put his hand behind my back, you know, and he led me out of there. He's like, "You don't want to go in there." And I was like, "What is that place?" And he was like, "Well, you know," and he was this really tall guy. He had like a trench coat on and a hat. He almost looked like a detective or something, you know. But he just looked like a professional. And he was like, "Well, we thought that if we planted enough trees in there, that you wouldn't have to see them," is what he said. And I was like, ugh. And I looked up at him, and I was like, "Wow, even though you're dead, it looks like you still have problems to solve, huh?" And he was like, "Yep, it's true." And that was the end of my dream. Very interesting dream. So, there you go.